Okay, man. Yeah, I just wanted to ask you a few questions because I think this is very important stuff. I want to like spread this meme about like the, wild animal suffering and rights violations and why how we should like be thinking about this. Uh, so so first of all, like you agree, like nature is like the one of the largest sources of like suffering and rights violation on the face of the earth, like even more than animal agriculture. Would you agree with that?
Probably, yeah. I mean,
So is this something?
it also depends on like
Go
some
ahead, sorry.
circumstances, right? Like I've met some vegans who were like, yeah, let's make sure that the agricultural system is all veganized and, we're not responsible for, any animal suffering with respect to how we procure like our goods and foods and stuff like that. But then they seem like perfectly amenable to letting the animal suffering in nature continue in perpetuity. And it's like, okay, well, it seems like if you're open to that contingency, like you actually want this to continue infinitely, right? So that vegans who advocate for that sort of thing, like it seems to be the case that they are actually cool with infinite animal suffering as long as like humans aren't causing it. It was just kind of weird.
Yeah, like that's what one of the questions I wanted to ask you. Do you think this is something separate to veganism?
Um, well, it depends on like what you mean by veganism. So like, on certain definitions of veganism, then no, it's not going to have anything to do with it. On my definition of veganism, I think that it's just captured by it. So it would have something to do with it on my semantics, but on most people's semantics when they're talking about veganism, like it wouldn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, so I remember you used to go by another definition that used to focus on like negative rights,
Yeah.
and you switched to another definition. Like, is there like a story why you decided to go by the definition like an applied ethical position that advocates for the equal trade adjusted application of commonplace human rights to non-human animals, and abandon the last definition? What do you think this one captures that the other one, didn't?
Oh god, I can't even remember what I had as the last one. Um, I can't even remember my old definition. It was
It
like,
had more to do with like avoiding negative rights violation, not like purchasing like animal products, stuff like
right,
that.
right, right. I think the new one is just simpler and it's closer to the center of the bullseye. Um, I don't know if I could explain more than that. I think it's just like a more succinct capturing of like my values when it comes to like what I mean when I say veganism. Like it's a more succinct accounting of my meaning when I use the word like vegan.
I see, I see. And then like some of the issues that come to mind when we think about wild animal suffering, like the starvation of these beings, like them having to bear the elements, predation
Hmm.
and procreation. I want to talk about procreation a little bit separately later, but
Yeah,
like
sure.
so. I have a question for you. Like, what can we do about it? Is there something that we can do about it now, or is this like the solution, like some technology down the road? What do you think?
So there have been like a few different proposed ways to deal with the issue. Like a few people have proposed using like gene editing technology to, veganize predators or yeah, I mean that's the context I've heard that solution proposed in. So like using gene editing technology to like veganize predators is like one possible solution, although I don't think that's very practical. Um, there's like other technological things that people have proposed to actually like separate prey from predator and veganize um, predators. However, like those solutions, it's not clear at the tail end of that whether or not we're even dealing with wild animals anymore because it sounds like they're trying to introduce some kind of domestication. The approach that I think is actually more kind of practical is to just displace their habitats with human infrastructure. Like, just slowly and slowly and slowly encroach on their territory, or on like encroach into the natural world, and any animals that you displace to the extent that you can, you give them sanctuary, you let them live out their natural lives in sanctuary. Ideally you don't let them like procreate with each other. I mean, but that's just my values. Like some people are okay with the procreation thing, some people are not. So yeah, the displaced animals, you give them sanctuary, and then you just keep on displacing until there are no more wild animals left. And then the entire crust of the earth is basically covered with human infrastructure, kind of like Coruscant from Star Wars. Like, so, um, yeah, that's like that's the solution that I think is the most practical because we're already doing that. Like we're already bulldozing rainforest and displacing wild animals, and our agricultural system like causes extinctions of animals as it is. It just seems like we just keep doing what we're doing, and then we'll eventually just achieve the end result that I'm hoping for.
Do you think there's like a certain threshold where like if we keep doing that, we're gonna like fuck each other over, or do you think we would find like a solution for that?
Yeah, so this is an interesting point. Like to the extent that like the natural world, or to the extent that prey predator relationships in the natural world and animal suffering in the natural world, to the extent that those things are like instrumental for human flourishing to some degree, or to like a sufficient enough degree, then I wouldn't be for displacing nature, right? Like I wouldn't be for getting rid of wild animals. Um, if there were like pragmatic concerns, if displacing the natural world into non-existence like entailed some kind of catastrophe that caused an existential threat to humankind, I wouldn't be for it, right? Like in the hypothetical that I'm talking about, like we would have like technological solutions to, you know, the things that we rely on animals for. Like but the thing is that I think that I still think that my solution is the most practical that I know of yet, because I think we do have those technological solutions like well in hand. We're just like we're not using them. So I can't even think of an example actually where like animal suffering, where like human flourishing is contingent upon wild animal suffering. I can't even think of a situation where that is like the case. But yeah, I mean, I can't even think of I can't even think. Can anybody anybody who's listening like think of an example how wild animal suffering facilitates human flourishing in any way? Because I can't think of any. A lot of people just take for granted, I've seen, that like there is this relationship, but I'm not convinced of it, right? So I'm not sure that displacing wild animals into non-existence would even present a problem. Like maybe bees, right? Like bees, they help pollinate things and stuff like that. I'm not even sure bees are sentient to begin with, but to the extent that they are sentient, I wouldn't be for displacing bees into non-existence if we rely upon them for our food supply, and we rely upon our food supply to get the calories that we need to actually like persist as a species. If that relationship obtained, then I wouldn't be for the displacement. But yeah, but I'm pretty sure we have technology to deal with that too. Like we're just not using it for that purpose. Like we could have like vertical farms with pollination that didn't require like intervention through like bees or anything like that. They like it wasn't contingent upon bee activity. Like we could have like a farming operation of some kind, or multiple farming operations of many kinds that just didn't involve bees. Like I'm pretty sure we have the technology for that already. We're just not really like deploying it at scale.
I see. And then specifically about like predation, which obviously is like a horrific issue, like animals ripping each other apart. Like a lot of us are already convinced that it is justified to kill predators.
Mm-hmm.
But recently, like I've heard some vegans, including Richard, Vegan Gains, that sure is this position makes sense to have it as a principle, but like it is not prudent to act on it. Like what do you think about that? Do you think this is just like a philosophical position that we have and we shouldn't act on it, or you
I
think
have.
the right thing to do is to act on it?
I have no idea what his position on that is, so I won't respond to his position. I'll just respond to the proposition itself. So like, even though like it's logically entailed from veganism, like it wouldn't be like a good idea or wouldn't be practical to act on it or something like that. I'm like, I'm not sure. Like I'm kind of agnostic about that. And like what would be like imagine arguing this in the human case, right? Like you see like
Exactly. That's what I thought. Yeah.
yeah, it's like you see an axe murderer
Like
or
if there was like a chupacabra running around, like and it started attacking humans.
yeah, yeah. So like
Like
if
I
so
wouldn't feel comfortable just letting it kill humans just because
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know what the ecological consequences are going to be.
Exactly. Like I don't know what the ecological consequences. I don't know what the consequences more broadly are going to be. I don't. I'm not. I'm completely ignorant to all of the externalities. Let's just let the chupacabra like eat all these people. Yeah. Like it's just the same sort of thing. Would you like apply the sort of precautionary principle in the human case? And if so, that's just like really weird. And if not, like what's the symmetry breaker? So it's the same kind of like NTT sort of
Yeah,
situation.
yeah, it comes down to like you having being consistent about it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like it's like you're free to have that view, right? But as long as you're applying it consistently and you're not like inferring a contradiction or affirming a contradiction rather.
Yeah. Why do you think there's so much confusion among vegans about this? Like a lot of the times they don't even see like a problem with the natural world.
Oh,
They idealize it, stuff like that.
nature pretty though. I think that's what it all cashes out into. Oh, nature pretty. Wouldn't it be a shame if we didn't have these pretty tigers to look at? Wouldn't it be a shame if we didn't have these pretty deer to look at? That's what it boils down to, I think, in most cases. Like when you really get to bedrock with these people, they're like doing some like weird kind of normative entangling thing. Like they have like these aesthetic preferences and they're getting them wrapped up in like their moral preferences in some way. Like they have like so they have like these moral preferences and then they have like these aesthetic preferences and I think they're just like kind of confused about the two. It's like, listen, I agree with you that nature's pretty. I have a fucking nature scene tattooed on my arm. I agree that it's pretty. That doesn't mean that I think it's worth preserving. It doesn't mean that I think it's like ethical to keep it
Exactly.
around. But these people think that like it's morally justified just because like it's pretty somehow. And yeah, I grant that it's pretty, but that doesn't mean that I think it's morally justified to keep it around. I think they might just be like a little bit confused because I don't know what motivates a lot of them, but I have a suspicion that just boils down to like nature pretty though.
Hmm. What are some of the like cringiest takes or apologia that you heard from vegans? I've heard you like say that some vegans like advocate for rewilding and stuff like that. Anything else
Yeah.
come to mind?
I mean, like, just the advocacy for real rewilding is pretty funny, right? Because, I mean, it's basically just like you're funneling these creatures into like a death machine. It's like it's like funneling them into a factory farm, except the factory farm is just
Yeah,
like
it's like reintroducing predators
yeah,
almost.
it's like yeah, reintroducing like wolves to Yellowstone or something like that, or cutting a bunch of elk loose across like their recovered native range or something like that. So like the American elk lost like 90% of its native range, and I think like 80 something percent of it has been restored through real rewilding efforts. And it's like, wow, you just condemned like a whole bunch of sentient beings to death. Like, what are you doing? Like, that's just craziness. So I view it as like instead of funneling them into a factory farm, you're just funneling them into a separate death machine. And it's like it just sounds crazy to me, you know. So that's like one kind of apologia that I've heard where like you know oh well, wouldn't it be like good if we restored the native range of this animal? It's like, well, why? Like, why is that good? And I never really get like a really good answer. And it's like, oh, it's just elk are pretty. Wouldn't it be a shame if we lost the elk? It's, okay, well, I mean, I'm sure that like short-faced bears were pretty like aesthetically pleasing to look at too, but I'm glad that there are no short-faced bears out there fucking chasing me around because they were like, I don't know, like 12 feet tall or whatever. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Any other cringy takes that come to mind that you think we should be like debating?
I wish I wrote these down actually. Like I wish I wrote down like all of the cringy takes. I write down all my cringy takes for seed oils, but I don't write down all my cringy takes for vegan stuff. I should start doing that. Let me look at my argument here, and maybe if I look at some of the premises and think about how people have rejected them in the past.
What's the argument exactly?
Oh, it's the argument for colonizing nature. I put it in the VC
I
text.
see. You formalize an argument for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if the natural world contains intolerable rights violations and we do not know if nature is a net positive or net negative for utility, and there is not any known practical means by which to end the rights violations beyond the use of force, and the natural world is not currently instrumentally vital to facilitating human flourishing, and by natural world I just mean like wild animal suffering. I should actually just like do a term substitution there. Then we are justified in displacing nature into non-existence. So yeah, like I think all of these propositions are true. Nature entails intolerable rights violations. We do not know, or we do not know if nature is a net positive or net negative to utility, so it doesn't factor into it. There's not any known practical means by which to end the rights violations beyond the use of force. As far as I know, that's true. The natural world is not currently instrumentally vital for facilitating human flourishing. I'd say that's conditionally true. Like for bees, maybe it's conditionally false. But like for bears, I'm not sure how it's true. So
Yeah, I think that argument is definitely a defeater right there. You had anyone so far that had a big enough balls to debate you on it?
well, there was one guy who just like he just took all of the premises in conjunction and then just said that they were all wrong. He was just like, "Oh yeah, that's all wrong," and I'm like, "Well, how is it wrong?" And then he just like gibberated a bit, and that was the end of the
Yeah,
conversation.
right, and no argument.
Yeah, there was no argument.
Yeah.
I haven't really heard like a good solid argument against it. I mean, a lot of it is just trivial though, because when I say like intolerable rights violations, like that's not describing anything beyond just like a statement about my preferences about what I think the world should be like. So intolerable rights violations just means like there's like some stuff in the world happening that that I don't like is basically what it amounts to. So there's some stuff here that's like indexed to my norms that's going to be like trivial to defend because all I have to do in order for the proposition to be true is just give an accurate accounting of my feelings. Yeah, so like
And then one of the things that yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna think like I wish I had kept like all of the apologia that I've heard because I think that would be really funny to talk about. Nothing's coming to mind. Just generally people just gesturing at me about it, like, oh, here's that guy that wants to like bulldoze nature and torch it with flamethrowers, and it's like, okay, bruh, calm down. That's not me. Yeah, haven't heard much.
Yeah, one of the things that you don't like about nature is then like procreation. I want to understand what your view. I'm like myself, I'm confused about this one. Like I just want to understand, have some clarity on what your view is. Like,
Yeah.
what's your view on procreation? Are you saying that like an animal doing something to another animal against their will is morally problematic, or are you saying that like procreation is universally problematic, even like animals happily fucking?
Yeah. So that's a good point of like clarification to make. I don't think that procreation is like simplicit or bad or anything like that. In fact, like I would categorize myself as like a natalist. I want there to be like more happy minds in the universe, and if they come about through like ethical means of procreation, I'd be all for it, right? But I think that there
can be like ethical animal procreation as well, like not only sapient being procreation.
I guess it depends on the scope of the procreation, like what it includes and what it doesn't include. So, like, if we consider like taking cells from an animal and using those cells, or taking cells from like animal tissue and using those cells to like clone a creature or clone a new animal into existence, if to the extent we consider that procreation, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Oh, interesting. So you wouldn't have a problem like just bringing sentient beings into
existence?
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. I think that's a good thing. Here's the thing with like wild animal procreation in general, and even domestic animal procreation that I have an issue with. So like one of the things that we predicate for rape, like one of the things that makes the concept of rape obtain is like this notion of informed consent. Right, that somebody is capable of understanding the risks involved, has thought about the risks that are involved, has accepted the risks that are involved, and then has basically given the thumbs up to go forward with an act, right? Like that's the whole that's like the general outline of informed consent, right? I don't think animals give that.
Right.
Like I don't take animals to be like of the category of beings that can do that. Or at least non-human animals, I should be specific. I think some humans are capable of doing that. But not all humans, right? So like children I don't think are capable of doing that. Like even like probably most teenagers, if not like some like
Yeah, that's
young
what I was gonna
adults.
ask. Like, would this include like people that are barely below the age of consent?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's going to be a spectrum, right? Like I bet there are some very young teenagers who just like understand the risks. Like they are actually understanding of the risks. And I'm sure that there are some 40-year-olds out there who are so mentally deficient or conceptually like impoverished or whatever that they don't understand the risks, right? So I think that there are some like adults functioning out there in the real world who can't give informed consent for procreation, and there are probably some very young people who could. So like, but this is like what we predicate rape on, or at least to some degree. Like this is one of the things in the disjunction of things that can qualify as rape. And this is why we consider like statutory rape to be bad, because it's like, okay, well, these young people, we're just saying like below this cutoff, we don't have a good reason to believe that any of you can actually like give informed consent. So everything below this cutoff, interaction with anybody below this cutoff is going to be considered like a type of rape. And I'm not. An animal has like the average animal has like the cognitive capacity like below that of the average 6-year-old, right? So I don't see why it wouldn't be rape in almost all animal cases, or in fact all non-human animal cases. So like I'll give you a hypothetical. Like if you walked in on two like mentally disabled people, and like one of them is male, one of them is female, and the male is like mounting the female and trying to have sex with her. Like, would you separate these people if you knew that they were like mentally disabled in some way, like to the degree that like they were no smarter than that of like a cow, right? Like I would feel an inclination to like separate them because I feel like something wrong would be happening there, right? So like if you say you're like walking through a school or something like that, say you work at a school and you walk into, you know, the special resources room and you see like one of the mentally challenged, or like one mentally challenged kid like trying to have sex with another mentally challenged kid, like you would have the inclination to separate them, right? Like you would want them to not do that. Right? And I can't think of a good symmetry breaker between that situation and like two animals in the wild doing it, because the animals in the wild are not aware of the risks. I'm not even sure that they're aware of what's going to happen after copulation is done. They're not aware of like all of the risks of pregnancy, like things like eclampsia, things like, the fetus being turned this, that, or the other way. Like they have absolutely no concept of any of this stuff, so far as I can tell. And yeah, we're just going to let them do this risky stuff that in the human case we would never tolerate. And it's like NTT, like, why tolerate it in the animal case and not the human case, right?
Yeah. So, what do you think would be like then like a proportional way to intervene in this in this context? Because like in the human context, like presumably at least me, I would be in favor, like if somebody was about to rape a woman, like and my only means of preventing that would be to use lethal force. I think I would do it in the human context, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like, do you feel the same in the animal context about that?
No, and that's and the whole, and the reason for that is in a lot of animal contexts, it's not clear that it isn't desired by both parties, right? Like both parties often
Right.
in nature desire this particular interaction, but that's the difference between consent and informed consent, right? Like even children could say yes to an act, but that doesn't mean that they understand what's entailed by the act. That's the difference between consent and informed consent. So in nature, like
Yeah,
I'm
it can be like enthusiastic but not informed, something
yeah,
like that.
yeah, yeah. It could just be like, oh, this sounds like fun. Yes, I want to do this. But that's not the same as saying like, oh yes, all of the risks, or at least a sufficient number of the most common risks, have been like rendered to me, and I understand what I'm getting into. I understand that these are the things that could happen to me, blah 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 blah, and I accept all of the responsibility if like something like pregnancy happens and whatnot. Like that's just like not happening in the animal case, and it's not even happening in some human cases. But that is the thing that makes the difference between consent and informed consent, right? So in the human case, like I would have the inclination to like separate them, but I wouldn't shoot any of them over it. And in the animal case, like I would have the inclination to separate them, although in the animal case it'd be like a little bit more difficult to do that, because separating like a buck from a doe would be like almost like a suicidal act, because like the buck would just gore you until you were dead. So like there wouldn't be like really practical means by which I could do it in the natural case, but if I could without like risk of injury, I probably would. I wouldn't shoot any of them over it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
so it wouldn't be like in the predation context, like where it would be proportional to use lethal force. You don't see it that way in the procreation
yeah,
context.
like it's just not like the same kind of thing that's happening. Like I don't take like the sex act that's happening in nature between two animals to be analogous to one animal ripping the other to shreds, right? I think one
Yeah,
lethal
for
force
sure.
is justified, and in the other case, lethal force is not justified.
Yeah, and is this where like displacement of nature would come in? That's the way to
Yeah,
tell
because
it.
like the idea is you displace nature incrementally, and you take the displaced animals and give them sanctuary, and then you just prevent procreation while they're in sanctuary. That way, there are no new animals coming into existence, unless you want to clone them or something. Um,
Yeah, just you said something interesting that you said you would be like in favor of like bringing sentient life into existence. Like, uh, do you then think that there's like would be an ethical way to keep pet industry going? Like, I
oh
feel like
yeah,
a lot of vegans are gonna have like a negative attitude against that. You do think there's like a ethical way to just to manufacture like beings into existence?
oh yeah, yeah. No, no, I would be in favor of like the only issue that I have with like pet breeders is the associated practices that I find like problematic, like making the animals have sex and then like discarding the animals that like don't meet the bar for certain standards within like a breed category. Like those practices are absolutely disgusting, and I don't support them, right? So like in general I'm against breeding. But if all breeding means is like we're cloning animals and we have like these cool like we have like these cool animals and we just like sell them to people, and we're not discarding the rejects or whatever, like, or we're terminating animals that are going to be like rejected after they reach like um once they come to term, so to speak. Like if there was some
I see.
way of if that's what the industry looked like, if that's what the pet breeding industry looked like, where we were just like cloning these beings into existence and then selling them, like I wouldn't have an issue with that. And a lot of people would be like, "Oh, well, that just sounds like trafficking." And it's like, well, if
Yeah,
trafficking,
yeah. I was gonna ask. I was gonna ask, like, because to me it sounds like a little bit exploitative. I just want to see if you would accept it also in the human context. Like, let's say we were like breeding mentally disabled beings into existence and like using them as like our best friends or whatever. Would you be in favor of doing that sort of thing as well?
I just don't see where the wrong thing is happening. Like it's like, okay, you're breeding these like ostensibly happy minds into existence, and they're just like going off to homes to be cared for and loved. It's like that sounds based.
I see. So it would be about whether the empirics actually hold true that they are happy minds.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Of course. Like if you were just like breeding nothing but miserable minds into existence, for like obviously I wouldn't be in favor of that.
I see. What do you think about like uplifting? If we had, have you heard of like animal uplifting?
What is that again?
Yeah, like if I remember correctly, it's like when like if we had like some sort of technology to increase the level of intelligence of animals, or like the level of sapience. If we
Mm.
had that technology, do you think it would be the right thing to do that, or do you think it would be fine to, or would it depend only if it increases their quality of well-being, or what
Yeah,
do you think
like
about that?
I wouldn't take a hard stand on it unless like increasing their intelligence or their cognitive capacity or their sapience or however you want to cash it out, like unless increasing that actually like increased the quality of their conscious experience, which I guess I would kind of grant that it probably would, just intuitively. I don't have any empirics to back that up. It's just like a feeling that it probably would do that. Then yeah, I'd be in favor of it. Like use some genetic, tools to give these animals like a richer quality of experience. Like I wouldn't have an issue with that.
Interesting, interesting. I have one more question. Like, what's your view on the future of sentient life? Like, what should we aim for? Like, I've heard you say things like we should like leave this old dirt ball behind and like create an O'Neill cylinder, an O'Neill cylinder in space. So, what is your view on the future of sentient life, and are you optimistic about those goals?
Well, the whole like leaving Earth thing is just predicated on listen, like the Earth and just existing in this environment is risky because we have things like hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions. Did I say earthquakes already? Um, we have like crazy lightning storms. We have like monsoons that drown people. We have like all of this crazy stuff that happens, and it's just the Earth doing what the Earth does, right? So I looked at the statistics, and it's somewhere along the lines of like every single year, like tens to hundreds of thousands of people, depending on the year, are killed due to natural disasters, and like hundreds of thousands to millions of people are maimed due to natural disasters, and millions of people, like millions upon millions of people, are displaced every year um, due to natural disasters. And it's like, I don't think in the long term this is something that we should be tolerant of. So I see two options. Either we leave Earth in favor of a less risky environment, or an environment for which we could provide like a reasonably sound argument that is going to be less risky, or we like figure out a way to control nature. And what I'm talking about is like figure out a way to control tectonic activity, figure out a way to control like the moon's gravitation so that tsunamis don't happen anymore. Like that just like that's completely impractical so far as I can tell. So like I would be in favor of just like saying, okay, this natural environment that we were kind of like raised in, that we evolved in, this is just like not a good place for us to end up. Like, this is just not a good place for us to be. It's hostile, it's inhospitable, it's trying to kill us all the time. So let's just do something less risky. Like, and the answer here is not to go to another planet unless it just doesn't have all of these same risky things. Like the thing here would be to just like have a structure that we exist in space. But you're asking about like the future of conscious minds in the universe. Like, so I'm in favor of bringing about like, happy conscious minds and stuff like that. I wouldn't be opposed to just like creating machines that just simulated happy minds and just do away with these like shitty biological bodies and just like have computers or machines that actually just simulate like happy existences, or happy existences. And you have some philosophers actually talking about this. They have like this concept of hedonium. So hedonium is the smallest computational unit capable of supporting a positive existence, like a positive sentient existence, and then just like filling the universe with that stuff. Like just filling the universe with this computational material called computonium, but it has a specific function, which is to produce like happy conscious experiences, and that would be called like hedonium. So this is like this concept of simulating happy experiences and just like filling the universe with this computonium hedonium stuff, and just like having nothing but just infinite numbers of simulated happy existences in like some computer program or some computer simulation. Like that's one like end stage, like really late game goal when it comes to like the whole sentience thing. But in the short term, I think
Interesting.
like just hopping into an O'Neill cylinder in the short term is probably better than existing here on Earth, where like lightning storms and volcanic eruptions and earthquakes are like trying to kill us all the time.
Can you explain what an O'Neill cylinder would be? People that don't know about it.
Yeah, it's like a theoretical kind of like space station type thing where it simulates gravity by using centrifugal force. So it spins. It's a cylinder shape. It spins. Yeah, somebody put it in the chat. It's a cylinder shape. It spins and it has windows on it. It could be on the front or the back or along the shaft of the cylinder, and it lets in like daylight from the sun. You can orient this thing, you can maneuver it around, like you can actually have a propulsion system on it. So here on Earth we don't have a propulsion system on the planet, so if an asteroid is headed our way we can't do anything about it. But if we are in like an O'Neill cylinder or a likewise kind of mega structure in space, um theoretically we could do something about it. It'd be far more practical. We could just have like a propulsion system on this thing that just moved it out of the way so we wouldn't get hit by comets and meteors and asteroids and stuff like that. So it just seems to me to be like, at least in theory, to be a much safer environment than the Earth is likely to be long term. So I'd be in favor of just like colonizing space and just writing off planets as a lost cause, more or less.
And how optimistic are you about this goals? Because some people like say that humanity might be like only like in the technological infancy, and we might destroy ourselves or something like that. What do you think? Are you optimistic about it, or are you pessimistic, or what?
I think I'm optimistic about it in the long term, but in the short term, there's going to be a lot of people who cope about it and be like, "Oh no, my nature though." They're just going to be like really kind of cringy about it. But I think in the long term, I hope we end
Yeah,
up,
hopefully
yeah,
we win out in the battle of ideas against those cringe takes.
yeah. I mean, I don't. The funny thing about my views is I don't think that they are views that the average person would find like particularly unpalatable. It's just that they have like entailments that would make people that make tend to make people uncomfortable for some reason. It's like humans should favor less risky environments. I don't know anybody who wouldn't sign
Yeah,
off on that.
it's like veganism. I think most people have like vegan values. They just like really confused about it.
Yeah,
Like
I
I've come across many people, and most people seem to have like values against animal cruelty and exploitation,
yeah.
but they just don't put it into practice. Seems to be the same thing with this sort of like wild animal suffering thing.
Yeah, exactly. So like I think that's probably right. Like a lot of people, I mean, the whole notion of like building a house instead and living in a house instead of living outside in a tent is like, hey, it's just like safer and more comfortable. So clearly those are things that you value, right? Um so like if they weren't things that you valued, why are you fucking around with a mortgage instead of just like living in a tent? And an extension of those values is like, yeah, like we want to live in a place that's like safer, more secure, we have more control, and that's just like not Earth in the long run. That's just like some other thing. Like it could be like an O'Neill, or it could be on an O'Neill cylinder. It could be like a Dyson sphere or a Dyson swarm or a Dyson ring or something like that. Some mega structure that we just live in that we have way more control over than this, dodgy natural thing that we evolved on.
Yeah, man. Anyways, really interesting stuff. It was great talking to you. I have no other questions for you, but I'd be interested if anybody else has like questions for you and stuff. If you want to take some questions, but
Yeah,
that's it
sure.
from me, really.
Yeah, I'm gonna be around for a bit if people have questions. It was nice chatting though.
Yeah, man, it was nice finally chatting and not meeting you in person, but in voice or whatever. Like I
Yeah.
really yeah, I appreciate your work, man. You're really smart guy, man.
Thanks,
Keep
man.
it up. Keep spreading these good memes.
I did have a question though. What are your intuitions now on the wild animal procreation thing? Does it seem weird to you now? Like, do you have like intuitions now where like if you were to think about two deer having sex, it would be like analogous to watching like two mentally handicapped people having sex where like they can't give informed consent and stuff?
Yeah, I think it does seem a little problematic as well in my view.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, based.